Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
Hey everybody, I'm Rick Sanchez, and I want to welcome our viewers from all over the world, especially those of you who are watching us on the portable TV app. I want to tell you something important today. The United States of America is enacting what we could easily call the catch up to China measure. As in to catch up to China. That's right. Members of the U.S. Congress's Foreign Affairs Committee are enacting sweeping legislation to, quote, boost our economic competitive against China. Right there in Congress. That's what they're talking about. And much of this discussion centers on accusations about China not playing fair. For example, our business leaders and our politicians have long argued that the Chinese government is cheating and that they're not a true representation of what we have, for example, democratic capitalism. Because the Chinese, that guy right there, Xi Jinping, funds some of their own private businesses over there in China. So then they're not really private businesses, and it's not fair to our private businesses. So what is the United States going to do? Are we going to stick to our guns and show them that our free market system, where corporations have to succeed or fail on their own merit, is a better model? Is that what the United States is going to do? Well, actually, no. Listen to this. The Biden administration announced yesterday that it plans to take $52 billion of your money, your taxes that you pay, right, to fund private semiconductor production here in the United States. $52 billion of government funding. In other words, the government is going to fund private businesses to make computer chips. Your money. Did I say it was your money? Now, who does that sound like? If you said China, bingo, bells, alarms, you win. That's right. So what this sounds like then is that we are going to be copying, unless I'm missing something, it sounds like we are going to be copying China's model while criticizing China's model. And you heard it here first, as you often do when you watch the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again. Something else is going to happen as you watch this newscast. You're probably going to have some questions that are going to come to mind. For example, this question: is the U.S. trying to catch up to China by copying the Chinese model? Richard Wolff's going to weigh in on that. Who is bigger and mightier than both the U.S. and China, not to mention a bevy of other countries? And then why has President Biden agreed to let Germany from now on get its gas from Russia? All right, so those of you who watch our show know what viewers who get their news elsewhere probably don't know. You do, they don't. And there's a reason for that. For example, we here have reported repeatedly now that by 2028, China will likely overtake the United States as the world's leading economy. We've reported it and gone in depth and drilled down on it and done interviews. This is a story that apparently some of our politicians just found out about. And now here comes their Hail Mary pass to see if they can somehow score a last-minute turnaround victory. Veteran journalist and host of Boom Bust here on RT America knows a thing or two about Hail Marys and a thing or two about China and business. Here is Ben Swann.
Well, Rick, it is a fairly remarkable story. You know, when you consider the idea that China might be trying to force production or demand production of certain items or certain technologies in their country in order to compete with the world, that really doesn't come as a surprise. What is surprising is when the United States begins funding specific kinds of products and specific kinds of technologies in order to be able to keep up with China. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said on Monday that a proposed $52 billion boost in U.S. government funding for semiconductor production and research could result in, get this, 7 to 10 new U.S. factories. This is a Hail Mary of sorts, as the U.S. is desperately trying to keep up with China in the production of semiconductor chips. These chips are necessary for everything from consumer electronics like laptops, tablets, and gaming consoles to automobiles. In fact, the U.S. semiconductor shortage has caused automakers such as General Motors, Ford, and Toyota to cut production this year. Last month, Ford Motor Company warned that the chip shortage might slash its second quarter production by half, costing it about $2.5 billion and about 1.1 million units of lost production in 2021. Last week, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer unveiled revised bipartisan legislation to spend this $52 billion for U.S. semiconductor chip production and research over the next 5 years. Those who support that funding note that the United States had a 37% share of semiconductors and microelectronic production in the 1990s. Today, just 12% of semiconductors are manufactured in the United States. Now, this battle of semiconductor chips is not new. The Trump administration placed severe restrictions on the purchase of semiconductor chips from SMIC. That's China's largest semiconductor manufacturer. The Department of Commerce told American companies in the chip industry that they must first acquire a license to sell technology to SMIC and its subsidiaries. The department said it was taking action after a review in which it determined that the Chinese company may pose an unacceptable risk of diversion to a military end use in the People's Republic of China. Well, meanwhile, the Biden administration is also working to cut U.S. reliance on China for EV materials, electric vehicle materials, while also enticing unions with manufacturing work. The U.S. Commerce Department, in this case, is organizing a June conference to attract more EV manufacturing to the country. Biden's proposed $1.7 trillion infrastructure plan, it earmarks $174 billion to boost the domestic EV market with tax credits and grants for battery manufacturers, among other incentives. All of this, of course, leading us to today, with the Biden administration now proposing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of new production and new incentives in order to make the United States a competitor with China in that semiconductor and electric vehicle market. For the news with Rick Sanchez, I'm Ben Swann.
So we're going to beat China by trying to be like China. And we're going to give our money, taxpayer money, to corporations so that they can make, I suppose, huge profits while we're doing so. This is amazing. I mean, wow. If there's ever been a reason to talk to Richard Wolff, it's now. Help us understand this as Americans. Professor?
Well, you know, I take my hat off to you, Rick. You've captured most of what has to be said here. Here's what I can add. The Chinese have been outgrowing their economy relative to the United States for at least the last 25 years. On one level, there is nothing new here. Let me give you simply one statistic. Over the last 25 years, the average rate of growth of economic output, which we call the GDP, gross domestic product, has grown in the United States on average between 2 and 3%. It has grown over the same period of time in China between 6 and 9%. It's not even close. You're literally watching the overtaking that you referred to before, which is now scheduled for 2028. They know how to build their economy. They know how to do it without help from the United States. Let me remind everyone that over the last 70 years, U.S. foreign aid has gone to most third world countries in the world, not to China because of the Communist Party leadership there. And the Chinese have outperformed every single one of the countries that received aid from the United States. They have demonstrated economic growth on a scale that makes the rest of us in the world gasp. It took a long time for the Congress, apparently, to get the message. So yes, they are now copying, and they're trying to cover it over by denouncing them for their civil liberty problems or their problems with the Muslim minority, as if the United States didn't have comparable problems. It's a little thin, the veneer they're pulling over the wool, if you like, over our eyes. But I think you've captured it, that the United States is in deep economic trouble, and for the first time in almost a century has a very powerful economic competitor.
Let's go to the arguments that I know that we're going to be hearing out there on the political side. We will soon hear, after other people start reporting the story now that we here on this newscast have, that Joe Biden's a communist. And the fact that he is giving money to these corporations means that we're creating a socialist system where companies don't have to live by their own merit, so to speak. But yet, as I ask you that question, I also know that for years, all administrations have been subsidizing huge corporations in the United States. So that argument is not really that new.
No, you're absolutely right. The notion that the United States is a private enterprise economy, the grain of truth there is we do leave more to the private sector than many other countries, not just China, but compared to most European countries, our private sector is larger. That is true. But it is not true that the government hasn't subsidized, hasn't given breaks to corporations, first in this industry, then in that one. Let's remember, back in 2008, which isn't exactly ancient history, the United States bailed out the General Motors Corporation, literally gave them $50 to $60 billion without any strings attached, never got it all back. That's an enormous subsidy to a major producer. Let's remember that the American military does business purchasing at very advantageous prices enormous portions of U.S. corporate output. The charging the Chinese companies with playing footsie with their government, which is probably true, is also coming from a country that has been doing that for as long as we've had a military. That's why President Eisenhower called it a military-industrial complex. So there's a lot of game playing here. But the bottom line, as you rightly said, is that the United States is recognizing that what they do in the People's Republic of China builds economic growth and power, and that's what most people in the world list as the #1 priority for the economic systems they live in.
What a fascinating conversation as usual. Dr. Wolff, Richard Wolff, my thanks to you, and have a fantastic day.
You too, Rick.
This is The News with Rick Sanchez, and when we come back, we are all worried about war between nations.